I read to you from the book Evoking HM Seervai, Jurist and Authority on the Indian Constitution. The book has been compiled for his centenary by Firoza H. Seervai. It is published by Law and Justice Publishing Company, and I am happy to tell you that my friend Manish Arora of Law and Justice Publishing Company brought out the first edition in 2005, and then reprints came in 2021, 22, 24, and the book is priced 595 rupees in paperback. I read to you the portion relating to Advocate Generalship of HM Seervai. It has been written by TR Andhyarujina on page 25 of this book. The post of Advocate General of Bombay was a distinguished one. Its origin could be traced back to as early as the East India Company's time, and the office had been occupied by only the leading practitioners of the original side, Bar of the Bombay. Seervai's own senior, Sir Jamshedji Kanga, had occupied it for 13 years. The Advocate General, by virtue of his office, was also the leader of the bar. When the office became vacant in 1957, Seervai was offered it and he accepted. Seervai held this office with great distinction for 17 years. During those years, he devoted himself almost exclusively to state government work, though according to the terms of his retainer, he was free to appear for private parties in all cases except those to which the government was a party. The legal government of the government of Bombay of those days was a highly competent one and was headed by a remembrancer of legal affairs who was fit to be a high court judge. Seervai's opinion was sought in several difficult and delicate matters in which the government was involved. Sometimes ministers desired legislation or action whose legality was doubtful, merely to please their constituencies. At such time, the legal department, not being able to prevail over the minister, turned to Seervai for his opinion. Such was his stature that his opinion, casting doubts on the legality of any proposed action, usually silenced the controversy, and politicians and ministers readily accepted it without demur. He was quite indifferent to the fees he received. At a time when other seniors at the bar made handsome incomes, Seervai's income was modest. It seems ludicrous, but by the terms of his retainer, the Advocate General was not paid for any government brief on the original side, unless it was recovered by way of costs, and only rupees 150 per day per brief on the appellate side. Seervai was able to maintain the high stature of his constitutional office and his own position, as he was not a political appointee and did not consider himself one. The makers of the Constitution, adopting the provisions relating to the Advocate General from the Government of India Act 1935, had stressed that the Advocate General should be a person of independence and standing, and unlike the office of Attorney General in the United Kingdom, the Advocate General's office should not be a political office. They stated that the Advocate General should have no political affiliation with the government of the day, and the person selected should have the confidence of successive governments who would retain his appointment, irrespective of the political fortunes of the government or governments with which he may be associated during his tenure of office. Seervai was a law officer in that mold. Governments came and went, but Seervai did not feel it necessary to resign with the installation of a new government, nor did any new government ask for his resignation. This was because Seervai remained above the dust and din of politics. Indeed, barring the Chief Minister and the Law Minister, he knew no minister or political functionary. Such was his professional standing that in important consultations, the minister in charge came to Seervai for consultation in his chambers. The only exception he made was in a rare case when the Chief Minister required his matter in a matter of great delicacy. On such occasions, Seervai would meet the Chief Minister in the latter's office in the Secretariat. This detachment from politicians and from the government of the day was his strength. Moving further, on the other hand, when he was not constrained by his personal convictions of iniquity, no more redoubtable defender of the government's power and privileges could be found than Seervai. In the state of Punjab versus Sodhi Sukhdev, he vigorously defended the government's privilege of not disclosing documents on the ground of it being injurious to the interests of the state. In the celebrated case of K.M. Nanavati versus State of Bombay, the governor of Maharashtra had exercised his power of pardon to suspend the sentence of life imprisonment on the appellant, Commander Nanavati, pending the hearing of an appeal to the Supreme Court. This action was challenged in the High Court. Seervai successfully defended it before a special bench constituted to hear it, and the governor's action was upheld. However, the Supreme Court by a majority judgment set aside the governor's action on the ground that it trenched on the court's power of entertaining the appeal. Seervai was convinced that the majority opinion of the Supreme Court was egregiously wrong. As he listened to the powerful dissent of Mr. Justice Kapoor in that case, Seervai felt that the time had come for him to write a critical commentary on the court's decision. For several years, Seervai had felt that there was great need for a book on the constitutional law of India, similar to the work of Dr. Vines on the Australian Constitution. Thus was born the idea of what he later considered his life's greatest achievement, his book on the constitutional law of India, over which he labored for 35 years to eventually produce 4 editions. When Seervai began writing his book in 1961, he underestimated the task as he believed he knew most of the law to be written. It took him 6 years to publish the first edition. The last chapter on the amendments to the Constitution was written within a few weeks of the Golaknath case. Seervai made a devastating criticism of the majority judgment of Chief Justice Subbarao in that case, which incredibly held that the power to amend the Constitution was an ordinary legislative power to be found in the residuary entry of the Union legislative list, and that a constitutional amendment was subject to fundamental rights. The fundamental rights could therefore not be amended at all. The judgment was hailed as a great libertarian achievement of the Supreme Court, but it was legally indefensible. Seervai exposed the fallacies in the judgment with withering criticism. I consider the first edition of Seervai's book as the best of his writings. When the book was published, it was proclaimed a masterpiece. Nothing like it had been written in India before. Distinguished academicians abroad and in India hailed it. Thank you.